The information and views expressed by our host or guests on the Unlock Potential podcast are their own, and not a substitute for professional medical or fitness advice. Always consult with qualified healthcare or fitness professionals before starting any new exercise program or making changes to your current routine.
I told myself that I was going to work hard enough, long enough to make enough money to do all the things in life that money can't buy.
Oh, nice.
Health later.
Yeah.
Health later.
Yeah.
Life later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I died twice.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. I'm Brian Delaney. Our focus this season is fitness. I'll be joined by Dr. Corey Duvall, who's going to guide us through his protocol for getting into your best shape so we can live our best lives and serve others well.
Hello and welcome to episode 28 of Unlock Potential. Today I am interviewing Derek and Erin Fitzgerald. I'm so excited for you to get to meet them, get to hear their story, get to learn more about not only the life story and the accomplishments, but also really the secret behind it. Like what's underlaying all of it, the intentions, the decisions, the values, and the vision that have allowed them to not only accomplish what they've already accomplished, but still be growing an incredible business, affecting communities, societies with their generosity, and just being on the tip of the spear of excellence. So happy to have them with me. I know you'll enjoy it too. Awesome, guys. Welcome. How's it going? Yeah, absolutely. We have we're a little bit at a different format. Usually we have a couple of chairs facing each other, but there we go. So we got to connect while we were on on an insurance carrier incentive trip in Nevis, and what a beautiful place that was. But
gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. I had just come back from I believe I had just come back from a hike that day, potentially, or the day before. Got to sit down with you guys and share lunch with you, and share a lot more than that. And got to learn a lot more about Derek, your journey, and then as you two have come together, the journey and the life that you have built now, helping and supporting people, growing business, and just developing things to the next level. So thanks for being here again.
Yeah, we're excited. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start off, Derek. I want to start off with you because when I had heard some rumors, I was this guy who had done Ironmans, and I'm like, oh, an Ironman athlete. All right. Yeah. So this guy's either going to be an egotistical dickhead, or he's going to be like they only come in two flavors, really. So,
let me tell you about my Ironman.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you didn't ask. I wanted to.
I'm going to tell you anyway.
It's like vegans and CrossFit athletes, right?
You can do that without telling people, right?
Yeah, exactly. But just hearing about your journey, and it goes so much deeper than that, and to find out that you were the first ever Ironman finisher who completed an Ironman after a heart transplant.
Well, to be specific, it's after cancer and the heart transplant. So just the dual combo.
The dual combo.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that journey, because I'm sure that's not what you were going after in your life. Not as a young child, you didn't set a goal and say, listen, if I could get through cancer and have a heart transplant, I could be the first ever Ironman finisher. So
yeah, no, it certainly wasn't on my to-do list. I was an overachiever. I had a tech company, and we got to the point where we were successful enough to incubate other tech companies. We were selling off companies and just continuing to invent new technology for the big pharma space. So for us, for me, that was it. I was traveling around the world. I was in the pharma space. I was helping sell drugs. So I was interviewing key thought leaders in oncology at the time, and sitting down, flying to wherever they were, and saying, so tell me about the state of affairs in oncology. What's that like? And they would tell me how they were, at the time, just basically stumbling around in the dark, trying not to kill people. And I had no connection to cancer in my personal life, in my family. I certainly knew of people. But when I heard it from the doctors, I was like, these poor bastards. I mean, thank God I don't have cancer. And
imagine if that would happen to somebody like me, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I didn't have time for that. It wasn't in my schedule.
It wasn't.
And I was traveling for work, and I had just driven a full day, and I stopped halfway at my uncle's place. He happened to be roughly halfway. Long day of travel. I asked to go to the bathroom as soon as I got there, and found out with some GI distress that that something was not right. And so I was 30 and therefore invincible. And I thought, well, that's peculiar. I'm just going to ignore those symptoms. And they went away. And I went on about my life, and I thought, thank God I don't have to worry about that. And then 2 weeks later, they came back. And then 2 weeks later, they came back. And then 2 weeks later. So finally, after months of trying to ignore this, saying, well, that's really peculiar. I'm having this GI distress. I finally went to the doctor, and they spent 8 months. I mean, not to be graphic, but they did every test possible. Sticking every scope down me and up me they possibly could. And they couldn't find anything. And finally they said, well, Derek, maybe you're just one of those guys that has like a weird thing, and every 2 months or every 2 weeks you're going to bleed when you go to the bathroom. And I thought, well, that's going to be awkward and odd. But they said, you know what, before we let you go and go about your life, why don't we just do one last test? It's just an exploratory surgery. It'll be a outpatient. You'll come in, we'll numb up your abdominals, we'll make a 2-inch incision in 3 places. You'll be out that afternoon. We're just going to check. And so they put me on the table, and they put me under. And the next thing you know, they're waking me up in the middle of surgery. They're bringing me up out of sedation, and all these surgeons' faces are over my head. They're leaning over me going, Mr. Fitzgerald, we found something in your intestines. We weren't expecting it. We'd like to get it out right now while we're in here.
Holy moly.
Are you okay with that? And I was numbed up. I was high as a kite. I was like, sure, man. Hey.
Whatever you want, bro.
Take some extra.
And then I woke up coming out of surgery. Put me back under. I woke up coming out of that surgery, and there's like a half-moon arc of doctors who were my surgeons, doctors I'd never seen before, my family, and everybody has the long face. And I'm like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, Derek, we've got some bad news. We weren't expecting this, but we found a tumor the size of a grapefruit in your intestines. Now, I was overweight at the time, so a tumor the size of a grapefruit sticking out of my stomach wasn't seeing it, and they could push on it as much as they want. There was no discomfort, but they took it out. And they took out 2 feet of intestine on the other side, sewed me back up, and then they had it biopsied while I was still under. And they said, Derek, we had this biopsied, and you have cancer. You have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we think we got it all, but we're just going to proactively put you through chemotherapy, just to make sure we got it all. You know, we think it was all contained. But you can't go through chemotherapy yet because we just severed your abdominals from basically just below your sternum to just below your belt line. And you're going to need time to recover because chemo is an interesting journey. So you're going to rest, you're going to recover, you're going to heal from the surgery, and then we're going to put you through chemo. And that was the start of my cancer journey.
Now, so you successful career previous to this, very you're in it, you're at a place in your career at that point where you're just building a head full of steam. Like you said, you didn't have this in your calendar. How old were you at this point?
30.
30 years old. So no, like mortality, not on the radar in the least. Just, okay.
You had a motto back then too. It was like, I'm going to.
Well, yeah. I told myself that I was going to work hard enough, long enough to make enough money to do all the things in life that money can't buy.
Oh, nice.
Health later.
Yeah.
Health later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I died twice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know the result of that belief system, right?
Doesn't really work.
Exactly. Exactly. So you're at this point, you're healing up from the surgery. Surgery is a lot more invasive than they originally thought.
Yeah.
Now they've taken out the tumor, they've sewed you back together, still not ready for chemo. And then your chemo journey at that point starts. But your life has changed dramatically over a few month period of time since you just started to get the bowel distress. Or what was that period of time, would you say?
From the time that I was having the bowel distress, it took them 8 months of testing.
8 months of testing, which is a journey in and of itself.
When you don't know what's going on, every 2 weeks I'm bleeding. I became anemic. And so they did the endoscopy, they did the colonoscopy. The tumor that they ultimately found was like right in the middle of all where the scopes could reach.
Yeah.
So they're like, wow, we were not expecting this. So it was something where I just had to, it was a gut check.
Literally. Yeah.
And so from there, it was just a matter of, okay, so in my hospital bed, as they told me this, I immediately went back into management mode, crisis management mode. All right, doc, what's next? And that's the way I function. I laser focus. So I tune out all the noise and I go, what's the next step? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to get to where I want to go? Because ultimately that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And so I tuned everything out. And so from there, they said, all right, so in a few months, we're going to put you through physical rehabilitation. So I did that. I lovingly referred it to sweating with the oldies.
Sweating with the oldies. That's so good.
But I had to learn to walk again.
Yeah.
And so that was fun. And so it was me and I was 30 at the time. And then everybody else there was at least 30 years older than me. In a rehabilitation center in a hospital, just learning to walk, learning to stand on one leg, learning to build all those abdominal control muscles back. I mean, as you know, your abs are the core for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I had to rebuild all that. And finally I got to the point where they said, all right, you're good to go. Let's put you through chemo.
So what was that journey like through the talk about the journey, kind of the next leg of the journey through chemo? And obviously we have you on because we're going to talk a bit more about functional strength, about rehabilitation, about taking ownership of your life and your health, that kind of thing. But right now we're kind of in the dark night of the soul. At least we're starting that process. So
I mean just fair warning, it gets pretty dark here. In this story. But
even the way your doctor explained to you what chemo was going to be like. It's wild.
I spoiler alert, it gets better. So I don't want you to worry. This is a happy ending. The first day I went in for chemotherapy, I sat down with my oncologist, and he's like, "Derek, do you know anything about oncology?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know." I mean, that was my business. I was interviewing oncologists on a daily basis.
Remember that time you thought it would suck to be one of those?
Exactly. And here we are. And I said, "Well, doc, I actually interview oncologists, but I've never been on this side. I've never experienced it personally. I've never known anyone who's experienced it personally." And he said, "All right, Derek, well, let me put it to you this way. Picture that you're in an airplane flying high in the sky." I'm like, "Oh, this sounds nice. This is lovely." He said, "Now picture that airplane's on fire." I was like, "Oh, crap. Okay." He said, "Now fire is your cancer. He's like, Derek, what we're going to do is we're going to flood your system with toxins. And those toxins are going to put your plane into a medically controlled nosedive. And we're going to send that plane hurtling towards the earth. And hopefully the sheer velocity of the wind shear is going to put out all those flames. And it's my job, Derek, as your oncologist, to know exactly the last second where I can pull you back out of that nosedive just before you hit the ground, take you back up to a cruising altitude. We're going to check you out. And hopefully we got all the flames out. And if we didn't, we're going to do it again. And then we're going to do it again.
Oh my God.
And
accurate but terrifying way to describe chemotherapy.
And hopefully we get all the flames out before your body can no longer stand the toxins.
Wow. And this paired with your kind of hearing the oncologist say the quiet part out loud to you, you having interviewed it, being, interviewing the thought leaders in the space, knowing that they're just feeling around in the dark, hoping they get something.
Yeah.
And now you've got this oncologist who's like, we're going to take your body into a nosedive, turn the airplane into a submarine.
Hope you make it.
Best of luck. High five. It's like
that's the reality check of what chemotherapy is. They're just toxins that are strong enough to kill the cancer in your body, and hopefully they're able to stop giving it to you soon enough before it kills you. Yeah. So it's a unique perspective mentally. Absolutely.
So you have the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis. You're starting on the recovery process. What was the connection between that time and the event? Like, did they notice any heart distress at that time, or did that come later, or what did that look like?
So I start going to chemotherapy, and you sit. There's like lazy boys lined up, 5 or 6 lazy boys with, IV poles next to them, and so you make friends. Like you see everybody. You get on regular cycles. You're coming back for treatments, and so hey, Gladys, Bob, and so they could hang every chemo med for me in the bag, except for one particular med. And so that one, the nurse, she was awesome. She would sit by my side with a line going into my veins and a syringe. And she's like, Derek, this one drug is bad. In fact, we call it the red devil. So I can't hang it from the bag because it's too volatile. So what I'm going to do is I have to sit here with the syringe and infuse this over a half-hour period. Sitting here, slowly pushing the plunger in.
Whoa.
Said, if you feel anything weird, you let me know and I'll stop immediately. Because if this thing gets out of the vein into the rest of your bloodstream, it could damage your heart.
2% chance.
2% chance. But quite honestly, we know more about hearts than we do about cancer. So this is an advised procedure.
Wow.
You still cool with this? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going through cancer and chemotherapy. Everything feels weird right now. So I thought, well, yeah, sure. I guess I would be able to know if something was different, but I didn't. And so she sat there for half an hour and we just talk, and ultimately that one drug, it saved my life from cancer.
Yeah.
It saved my life from cancer. I'll knock on as much wood as I can. I'm grateful for that. After 5 months of chemotherapy, I was able to walk out of there. Bob and Gladys and the other patients that I had made friends with, you just show up some days and that person who was sitting next to you is no longer sitting next to you.
Yeah.
And you're just grateful to be able to walk out the door at the end of the day. So I made it, and they didn't have any bell to ring, but I rang that bell, and then 3 months later, I was like, well, geez, man, in high school I played soccer, but I've been so focused on my career and so not focused on my health. Maybe I'll just get back on a treadmill. Maybe I'll get on an elliptical. And That was 3 months after chemo. I get on the treadmill and I'm completely out of shape, completely deconditioned, but I'm feeling really, really horrible. I was like, well, I'm still working all this stuff, this poison out of my body.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Then I have a hard time breathing. And ultimately there was a hill from where I parked my car to where I walked up this hill to where my office was. And I would get halfway up this hill and all of a sudden I described it as if I'm in the 12th round of a heavyweight fight and that I'm knocked out, but I'm still on my feet. I just don't know I'm knocked out yet. The world starts spinning. My hands would get heavy. My chin would get heavy. It would go to my chest. And I was just like careening. And I would just find a chair, find the floor, whatever I could. And I would ride it out. And it would be like 60 seconds. At the time I felt it was like, I would describe it as like having 2 5-pound weights hanging from either lung.
Wow.
So not like an exorbitant amount of effort to breathe, but it was more than usual. So I went through that several months. Every now and again, I would go into the ER. I'd spend a night in the ER. And they go, well, you've got pneumonia. I didn't have pneumonia. Well, maybe you have pleurisy. I didn't have pleurisy. Finally, after multiple trips back to the ER, overnight stays, this one doctor comes to my bedside. He's like, we're going to put you through a cardiac stress test. We're going to see what that looks like.
Wow.
And this was 3 months after being declared in remission. And so I went through a cardiac stress test, and it's in the middle of the night. Now, initially, I would have my family come with me. And I'd call my parents, and they'd show up at the hospital. We'd spend all night together in the ER. By that point, I'd been back so many times, I'd stopped telling people. I was like, no, I'm just going to go to the ER. I'll be back tomorrow. This doctor sits next to me, and he says, Derek, I understand you've had a rough year. I'm afraid I've got some more bad news. You're not out of the woods yet. You're in heart failure. I don't know what you had planned for a lifespan, but we're going to have to reevaluate that. I was like, oh, okay.
Damn. That's a hard, again, I mean, you just in succession, because it sounds like you had a lot of success and you were kind of not necessarily life on easy mode, but kind of life on beast mode before that, where you were getting it done. And now, I mean, this isn't even pumping the brakes. This is pulling the freaking brake on life. And so what was that like? Take us back to that moment for you.
Sure.
You have that conversation with the doctor. Are you said most of the time you're just able to like focus. All right, what's next? Were you able to be there at that point, or did this start to settle down on you, start to carry some weight?
It definitely carried weight. Anytime a doctor sits down in front of you and says, we've got to reevaluate what you expect to be the rest of your life, it is a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
It's a reality check. And it shook me. But at the same time, crisis management mode, locked in.
Yep.
I called my folks. I was in a marriage at the time that, ex-wife now. But I called everybody and I said, all right, guys. And I'm trying to keep logic and emotion. I keep logic and keep emotion out of it. But just keep logic and so what's the next step is always my goal. And I'm like trying to keep together on the phone, like, all right, I'm at the hospital, you need to come get me. And I, even with as stoic as I can be and focused on goals and goal-driven, goal-oriented as I can be, that was rough. Yeah, I was, heart was in the throat. All right, this could be it.
Yeah.
Early 30s too at the time, which I can't even imagine. Like, even I'm like in my late 40s, and I can't imagine getting news like that, let alone
That's serious.
Yeah.
And so my business at the time, we had gone from 8 of the top 10 oncology pharmaceutical companies in the world that we were serving our business had expanded. I was dealing at the time, and again, in those 3 months, we had expanded into cardiology. So at that point, I was going around the world interviewing cardiologists.
Of course, because why not learn all the behind the scenes crap and hallway conversation, hallway gossip between these oncologists, and then have to be on the other side of it and be like, you guys still feel that way? Now you're doing the same thing with a freaking cardiologist. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So I quickly called my 2 business partners and I said, all right, so guys, we're not expanding into any other, because I can't take it. But, the doctors told me, they said, listen, Derek, we're going to do a couple of things. One, my ejection fraction. So ejection fraction, for those people who don't know it, it's the efficiency at which your heart is pumping oxygenated blood through your system.
Okay.
So the normal ejection fraction is somewhere between 55 and 65% for a normal human. That night, when that doctor came in and did that cardiac stress test on me, my ejection fraction was 15%, actually 18%.
Wow.
The cutoff to be on the transplant waiting list is 17%. It's a little subjective, but I was right on the cusp of needing a new heart 3 months after chemo. And there was those spells that I was getting, 30 seconds at a time, the world would spin. I felt like I was knocked out. But ultimately, what happened from there was I went for 7 years, going from 30-second spells to a minute spells to an hour spell, to the point where I was hacking and coughing, to the point where I thought that my spine would snap.
Oh.
All fluids. I got to the point where my heart wasn't strong enough to pump the fluid out of my lungs. So if I lied down at night to go to sleep, I would have drowned in my own bodily fluids. So they had to prop me up. I wasn't sleeping. I would stay awake for days until I would finally pass out. And every time I closed my eyes, I wondered if I was going to wake up.
Wow. So
that went on for 7 years, until finally I was to the point where I was sleeping 23 hours a day, and I was awake for 1 hour a day, and the rest of the time I was out of it.
Wow. Wow. That's wild to have gone from flying all over the country, interviewing, it sounds like being on the tip of the spear of some technology development, systems development for hospital systems, pharmaceutical companies, and doctors, to now where you're incapacitated, and you're thinking every day, and not unreasonably, totally reasonably, and with high expectation that every day could be your last, and suffering through that whole process. Yeah. I mean, it's something where if you make your life, if you see yourself as what you do, and for me, I was an inventor. For me, I led teams of technology experts, and I created tools and technology, and I loved the movies. So, we would have these company outings where I'd take everybody to an IMAX theater, and we'd go see the biggest, blockbuster on the IMAX. So Ironman was out at the time, the first Ironman, and that was like the last movie I took my company to see. Of all things.
Isn't
that wild?
And, all of those things slowly got taken away to the point where I was either asleep or awake for 1 hour, confined to a hospital bed. I didn't have the strength to do anything. And all those things that I thought made me who I was were just stripped away. And it was just me in a bed waiting to die.
You had told me a story about how you would hear people talking about movies that were coming out, because movies were a huge part of you enjoyed going to them, and you told me it started to occur to you that
your outlook changes
Yeah.
when you picture a future and you can't see yourself in it.
Like, I'm not going to go see that movie.
Right. So trailers
It's wild.
Wow.
Like,
would come on and I'd start bawling because I was like, I wish I could be alive to see that movie when it came out.
Wow.
I mean, it like we said, it gets dark, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, that is, and having that very real encounter. And at this point, like you said, you were a little bit overweight. You were living the corporate life, doing the thing, always eating out, being in that.
Yeah.
What I mean, your physical condition had to depreciate pretty significantly from just sitting in a bed at this point.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was a little over 200 pounds. Now for me, thin would be, 175. 175 carries on my frame well.
Yeah.
But I was 205. So I was overweight. I actually gained weight when I had chemotherapy because I had tumors that built down my throat, and the only way to scratch the tumors, make them ease some of that itching, was to pass food over those tumors. Anyway, I'd gained weight, 205, dying in bed, and just that was it. I went to Thanksgiving in 2010, and I figured it'd be my last holidays. And I'm just sitting there in a chair. They prop me up in a chair. And, I've kept my head shaved since cancer, thinking, it's just been like my own tribute to that experience, right? And so you've got nieces and nephews who think bald is hilarious. And they're all Petri dishes running around,
Oh my.
sniffing in their noses, wiping their snotty little noses with their hands, and then going, Derek, Uncle Derek,
Yeah.
let me rub your head. So coming out of Thanksgiving in 2010, I picked up pneumonia. And so went through pneumonia. I go to the doctor. I get treated for the pneumonia. I'm extremely weak at this time. I go for a follow-up chest x-ray, and I'm walking out from that chest x-ray back to my car to the parking lot. And I get a call from a phone number I didn't recognize. I pick it up, and it was the technicians who'd just taken my scan. And they said, Mr. Fitzgerald, we're not supposed to do this. We haven't even talked to our consulting physician yet, but we just looked at your scans. It looks like you're having a cardiac event right now.
Wow.
And I'm just walking back out to the car, and they're like, do you have a cardiologist? I said, well, yeah. They're like, well, if you have the cardiologist, go see your cardiologist. If you don't have a cardiologist, get to the ER now.
If you're tired of feeling low on energy and settling for the scraps, it's time for your personal revolution. We are helping people go from the person that they have been to the person they were truly meant to be, and helping people get to the next level in their life, their business, and their relationships. Follow us.
And by this point, my medical history is volumes thick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I called my cardiologist, who I just happened to have a regularly scheduled checkup with him the following day. And I called into the front desk, and I said, hey, can I see Doc Ehrlich today? I know I have something scheduled tomorrow, but can I get in there today? They're like, he's totally booked. I'm like, okay.
You didn't tell them what was.
I didn't tell them.
Yeah. Little details.
Casual about it. Can
I
get
said,
in?
no, he's not available today. But you can come in tomorrow for your appointment. I was like, great, okay. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm not going to go to the ER tonight. This might be my last night. Anyway, the last thing I want to do is spend it in an ER.
Yeah.
So I went home, and quite honestly, going to an ER with my medical history is unfair to the physicians who work the ER, because it's volumes thick, and they can't do anything. So I spent a sleepless night at home, and then the next day I walked in to my cardiologist's office. I sat in the waiting room. They call me back to the exam room. The nurse calls me back. She pulls out the paper over the table chair. I sit in the table chair. She takes my vitals. She listens to my heart rate. She was a new nurse. She goes, your heart rate is so low. Are you an athlete? And I said, no, I'm in heart failure. And she's like, all right, got it. Doc will be in just a minute. And she leaves, and the door closes, and I collapsed.
Wow. Are you an athlete at that moment?
Yeah.
It's like, well, kind of. I've been through cancer, and now I'm going through heart failure. It depends how you define it.
Yeah.
So So the doctor comes in, he opens the door, he sees me collapsed. They get me back up on the table. He tries to get a blood pressure reading out of this arm, no blood pressure reading with the cuff. Puts it on the other arm just to see if there's something wrong with this arm, no blood pressure there. And I was just flopping around. And I could hear him saying, all right, get the helicopter, get the ambulance. It's time for his transplant now.
Wow.
And so they rushed me to Penn Medicine. And I had been on the transplant list at that point for 4 months. Later on, I talked to some of the nurses who were there when they wheeled me in. And they told me that certain times they see people and they know. Mm-hmm. And they saw me and they said I was so gray. I had no more blood that was pumping through my body, so I was gray.
Wow.
And they said, you came in, we knew that you were close.
Mm-hmm.
So they wheeled me in and they took my ejection fraction measurement again. And at that point, my ejection fraction was 5%.
From 15 down to 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was there and they said, all right, so we haven't found your heart yet. And this was right after Christmas, just before New Year's. And they said, unfortunately, the positive reality for you is that this is a time of year when a lot of organs become available.
Wow. Wow.
So
true, but so sad.
Yeah, I never even would have put those things together, but that's wild.
The depression season of the holidays. Mm-hmm. And so they put me in there. They're like, we're going to still look for your heart, but in the meantime, we're going to talk to you about giving you an external heart pump, not a hump.
It's like a camel. It's just, it holds water. It holds, yeah.
You'll be fine.
We're going to give you an external heart pump called an LVAD as a bridge to transplant. So you can survive long enough that we can find you a heart. And so, again, at the time I was asleep for 23 hours a day. They're prepping me for the LVAD surgery. And they're like, Derek, you got to get up out of bed. You have to try and walk. You've got to do something. You've got to get your heart pumping, anything, just to give us enough time to either get you to surgery or get you to a heart transplant. And they pulled me up out of bed and I was shuffling, hugging a wall outside of my hospital room at Penn Medicine. And I walked maybe 20 feet. And I was like, I'm done. Mm-hmm. I'm done. I can't.
Wow.
And so they put me back in the bed and they, a day goes by. My family is gathered around my bed, holding my hand, kissing my head, wiping my brow. I didn't know that they were there.
Wow.
Dire stuff.
Yeah.
I had my last rites read to me.
You wrote that Facebook post too, where you said goodbye to everybody. I read that and I was like, I didn't know Derek then, but reading that, I was like, holy shit! Like,
that's got to be intense as his wife now to go back to that time before before Aaron. Go back to that time and just be able to see that part of the journey. What is that like for you now to go back and read things like that and see that?
I mean, we're both I think everyone should be aware, but we're like hyper aware of just how short this life is just because of, things that we've been through. But I think to go back and read that, I mean, I bawled, obviously. It's so funny because I see all these videos of Derek's story even as his wife, who I hear it all the time. It never doesn't hit me. Like, it always hits me the same way. Like, it always hits me like it's brand new every time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it is just, we wouldn't be here right now if you hadn't survived everything. So I think that reality is like, I don't know, things are, you're supposed to meet people, things are supposed to happen. So yeah. It's just emotional all the time in the best of ways, I think. It sounds like you just
there's almost like this deep sense because you went down there, not that you wanted to or would desire to, but because you went down to that kind of bottom level, now that level is available for y'all to experience life, right?
And I think I have Derek's ex and I have like a really great like co-parenting friendship, you know, for my stepdaughter. I usually just say daughter, but we have a really great co-parenting relationship. And I think part of what makes that work is I just already had like a level of respect for like someone who like to go through that.
Yeah.
Like she's just a good person, you know what I mean? Like, and to know what she went through is like an interesting perspective too, to be like in it at that moment is crazy.
Yeah. One of the things that they tell you when you go on a transplant waiting list, especially the heart, is because there aren't enough organs to go around to serve all the people who need the organs. And so the way the transplantation system works is that the more you need the heart, the worse you get, the more you need the organ, the higher you go on the list. So there's an inverse. You want to get better, but you have to hope to get worse in order to go up the list, in order to have an opportunity to save your life.
Jesus, like what? Oh my gosh.
And because there are so few organs to go around, to get to the top of the list, you really have to be at the final days of your life in order to have the opportunity to be saved, to have an option or an opportunity at life.
That's crazy. That's freaking crazy. Like you have to hope to live, but hope you get closer to dying so that maybe you can live because Wow.
Right.
Yeah. That's wild.
So it's the day of the surgery for my LVAD. And so the orderly comes in and they put me into a rolling gurney. And he's the coolest guy in the world. And he's wheeling me down. He's telling me jokes. And all of a sudden somebody comes up and whispers in his ear. And they stop me in the hallway as they're wheeling me to LVAD surgery. And he's like, okay, all right. And so the guy leaves and he's like, all right, boss, we're taking you back, change of plans. We're taking you back to your room. He's like, I can't tell you anything that's going on, but it sounds good. And so they wheel me back to my room. And I'm sitting there and my family's like, they were just hanging out there like, what's going on? And 2 minutes later, the transplant coordinator comes into our room and she's sobbing. And she's like, Derek, we think we found your heart. Do you still want to go through with this? You have a choice. And I looked at her and there had been a time when I was terrified of what I call swapping the engine out mid-flight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But at that point, I was just at that point where I either wanted the opportunity to live, and I wanted to take that opportunity, or I wanted the opportunity to die and take that opportunity. Where I was not living. It was survival, but I was long past hope.
Yeah.
And so I looked at her and I said, I don't have a chance. I don't really have a choice if I don't take this, do I? And she said, no, you don't have a choice. I said, okay, let's do it.
Wow.
And so at that point, she was like, got it. And there was that focus, there was that goal. And then all of a sudden, the medical team goes into this organized chaos, this dance. Everybody knows their position on the team. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows what they have to do. And they're like, all right, Derek, the team is flying. The team is already out in the chopper checking out the heart. If it looks good, they'll bring it back here. They'll open you up. They'll have the heart next to your open chest cavity. And they'll do a final check at that point. It's possible that will not be a match. If it's not a match, we'll sew you back up. We'll see if we can get that heart to someone else.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't imagine any of this.
Cracked open to hopefully have more, but then they're like, sorry, it didn't work. I'm just going to shut this back up.
Is there any way we could check on that before? I don't know. It's just a thought. Can we get a measuring tape, a ruler, whatever we need to do?
Right. Got a laser level in there.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see if it's on bubble. Just hold it. Bob, put that side down. We got to get it between the lines.
Right.
So
it's wild.
At that point, it was a long afternoon, but I stayed awake, and finally they asked me what I wanted to do with my old heart. Like, would you like that incinerated? Would you like to donate it to medical science? And I said, well, I don't know, what do most people say what they want to do with their
medium well? I don't know.
Right. What's the popular answer?
Do I have an option of like casting it in bronze and using it as a paperweight? And I said, no, you can't keep it. It's medical waste. But I donated my old heart to science.
Okay.
And then, so that night, around 11:30 that night, they put me in the rolling gurney, and I say my goodbyes to my family. There are extremely real possibilities that they advise you of ahead of time, that the transplant is the Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I said my goodbyes, and I'm like, all right. I mean, I was excited. I was like, I'm either going to have a shot at living or I'm going to die right now. I don't have to worry about this anymore.
That's the part that kills me. Like but the microphone, sorry. That's the part that kills me when you were asking about like, what does that mean now? Like I wasn't there, but I think about what that would be like going through that now. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't even imagine like being like on the other side as your family. Like when your family's sitting there like, God, I hope this works.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah. Just you being on the one side, having the experience, and just like being in this place where it is not living. You're in some sort of purgatory between the life you had and the death that's coming.
Right.
Almost inevitably, except for this scant chance that they find the right heart at the right time, and the surgery goes right, and everybody's choreographed in the hospital correctly, and all of that. And so you're going in this place with this sense of hope, while your family is sitting having a very, very different experience to the whole thing. And you're hopeful that, hey, either I will die or I will live. Like that's wild. And that now this is like time number 2.
Yeah.
Right? Time number 2 where you're seeing that through. So
yeah. So they wheeled me into the OR.
Mm-hmm.
They strap you down to this table. They strap your arms out. They've got to run all these lines. They have to put you on a bypass so they can transfer, keep you alive while they transfer the heart. But they had me. They put the light over my head, the mask over my face. They had me count backwards from 100 by 7s. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got to 93, I was out.
Wow.
And next thing you know, I'm waking up. I'm in a bed, and my now ex-wife was in the room with me. Now I'm intubated. I can't speak. I've got all these like accordion tubes coming out of my chest. I've got a bank of machinery around me, compressing and decompressing and beeping and clicking and whirring and, everything. It's this noise bank. And I'm laying there, and above all this noise, I'm hearing something, and I can't pinpoint it yet. And I looked at my wife, and I like gave her this look, and she knew what I was asking. Mm-hmm. Did I get the heart? Mm-hmm. And she's crying. She's like, yeah, you got the heart. Now I had my iPad with me, so I knew I wouldn't be able to talk. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was like, was it a success? And she's like, yes. And then like that undescribable noise, it's this thudding, and it's loud, and it's overpowering everything, and I could barely hear. And then it hit me. Like at a certain point in my life, my heart was strong enough that if I laid down in bed, I could hear my heartbeat thumping in my ears. And that's what I was hearing. I was hearing this other person's heart beating in my chest.
Wow.
And it's an overwhelming experience because I knew that I had been given a chance, not a cure, not a certainty, but a chance. And that was all I needed.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild to have that experience for the first, like that's, I heard this guy because he had a mechanical valve installed.
Yeah.
And he put the microphone right up to the mechanical valve and you could hear it, but now you're hearing a natural process of your body, but you got deacclimated or you became unacclimated to hearing that.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden you're hearing it again, but it's as a result of someone else's heart.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
someone else on the last day of their life, probably the worst day of their life, decided to save my life and loan me their heart.
Mm.
And for me, and I've yet to find out who this person is because it's set up like a closed adoption.
Mm.
When you go on the transplant list, they give you a social worker.
Mm.
When your family becomes a donor family, you're given a social worker.
Mm.
So I've written this donor family 2 times now. One initially 6 months after my transplant to thank them for my life. And then one about 3 years after I take that back, about 5 years after my transplant. To thank them not just for my life and everything that I've been able to do since, but to thank them for the life of my daughter, who would not be here. She came around 2.5 years after the transplant. She wouldn't be here. She's part of that person's gift, that legacy.
Wow.
That they've left behind. And I thank them for my daughter's life.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something, what speaks to me is the level of courage and generosity that this person had and compassion in the last moments of their life to save the life of a complete stranger. And a lot of people ask me, they'll say, well, Derek, I don't know that I could ever donate my organs after I go. And I'd be like, okay, great. Totally get it. Totally get it. That's a lot. That's a big ask, but one, as everyone knows, you're not going to need them after you're gone.
Yeah.
If you don't do anything with them and you're going to get cremated, they're ash anyway. If you're going to be buried, they remove them anyway and they throw them away. Mm-hmm. But my question to them is, okay, maybe you couldn't ask for, if you needed a transplant, would you ask for one? Oh, I don't know. If your child needed a transplant,
boom,
would you ask for one? And if you say yes to that, then you have to put yourself on the donor registry. For that moment in that future, long time from now, you have to say yes. And so this person said yes, saved my life, allowed me to survive, allowed my daughter to be born. And that has been the gauntlet, the challenge that's been thrown at my feet to how I make every decision about how I live my life from January 3rd, 2011 to today and every day from here on out. I have to earn this gift.
Wow. I
believe I'm going to see this person one day again, and I'm going to have to tell them what I did to earn the gift that they gave me. And that is something that I know I will never earn. That is a bar that is too high for me to ever reach, but that doesn't stop me from trying. And I will bust my ass to give back in every way possible, to make it easier for other people, to make it better for the next person.
Wow. What a deep pool to operate from, right? Just that, you have now gone through the deepest struggle and have come out with this profound perspective that is, you have somebody else's heart literally beating in your chest. So many things had to be orchestrated together and work together for the moment that where you happened, and you write on your iPad, was it a success? In order for that moment to happen, so many different things, so many dominoes had to hit one another and make it happen. And now you're here. Now you're in the recovery room. And it's post-op, but not really. It's like all the machines are still making things happen at that place. You're still very much in it. You're not out of the woods yet.
The journey's beginning.
That's a great. What a great point. When you hear Derek talk about this, Erin, like, do you have it sounds like you've really been able, as a result of proximity and as a result of y'all's relationship, you've been really able to wear this perspective, even though it's not something you specifically experienced. It feels like over the amount of time that you've been together, heard him talk about it, that there's really been an adoption of that same attitude for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like being part of this life together, like you said, adopting it, hearing those stories so many times, I almost feel like you almost feel yourself there too. So our first date that we went on, we didn't know this about each other until we got on our first date. And so he's telling me, like, kind of easing into a little of his story, right?
How do you get it? It's not like you're talking about, oh, I've got kids. It's like you're talking about, oh, this is,
yeah. And I, hopefully you're all right with me telling this part of it. We'll find out, because here we go. So, like your ex and you had recently separated, not recently, but like maybe a year separated. Nothing dramatic or argumentative. It just, it was time. And so he was like dating. And I think there probably, it seemed, you had said as much, that there was a level of like, what is this going to be like dating? Like, I'm going to tell people like this story, you know what I mean? And like, what's this going to, because that's a lot for somebody to think about coming into, I would imagine, for most people, except for crazy people like me, that's a lot coming into. So he like was telling me his story, and how, in January 2011, he got his heart, and I did not know that about him. And so what I ended up sharing with Derek on that first date was in June of 2010, I lost my sister. She was 24 years old, and she died of a drug overdose. She was a good kid, she got in a car accident, and they had to put rods in her arms, and the medications that they gave her for the pain, she was just one of those people who had it in her DNA to get hooked on pain meds, on
a highly addictive medication. She had it in her DNA to where medications worked properly on her.
I have opinions on that. Yeah, I do have opinion for sure, because it's just, there's so many better alternatives. But yeah, so she was a good kid who she never did any of that stuff, and she got hooked, and so she was she put herself in a rehab for 30 days. And the night that she got out, she did just as much and a little bit more than the amount of drugs she had been doing prior to the rehab. And she had a heart attack, and she died at age 24. And when she was on the life support and everything, the Gift of Life in Philadelphia, the OPO, Organ Procurement Organization, came into, I wasn't in the room at the time, so she was my stepsister, but blended family sister. The OPO came in, and they were asking if it was time to pull. It was time to make the decision. They were asking if we would want to continue her legacy and donate her organs. And thankfully, my stepdad had he was able, because everyone was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to think about that stuff in that moment. So he had the wherewithal, I guess, to say, yeah, I think she would really want that. We want that. And so she became a hero, and so it was interesting. So we find out on our first date that while Derek was like writing letters to his, donors' family, hoping that they would, read that and know what an impact, my family was getting letters from like because of, my 10-year-old daughter is able to see now. We use the cornea, you know what I mean? Like,
wow.
Just all these families, and it was, that gives you some kind of peace to know that there's something beyond that. And so now I'm meeting this person on this first date who's like telling me what that's like on the other side of that. So it was this like, and I didn't even understand what it meant at the time. I'm like, there's something here. Something just tells me.
I think you were right.
Yeah, right. There's something here. I don't know what it is yet. And I think it was, you go through life and you're like, I was athletic. Like I was athletic. You were not. I was. But I was already athletic. Like I got that part of it. And I so that wasn't new to me, but just connecting the dots and finding like a purpose kind of to like, what do I do with my life that's like bigger? And so meeting each other, and I know it sounds cheesy, but like it's the truth. Like we met each other. We're kind of like, there's like, we're going to do some good things.
Wow.
And so the living piece of it, I mean, everyone, caregivers and the families of the people who are lost are often kind of like forgotten or not, like it's always the patient, it's always, those things. But I think the perspective that we have to see from both sides and to be able to kind of like show that this is how your family member lives on, like all the good things you've done wouldn't have happened if those organs would have just been tossed in the garbage.
Such an incredibly powerful perspective, and the fact that happened is like, I'm thinking
Tinder date.
I'm thinking, so number one, he catfished you. He didn't tell you in the profile. So not to come at your character here, Derek, but I've got a few things to get out for Erin. She sent me some notes before. And just your thought. It's like, okay, appetizer? No, appetizer's the wrong time. A main course. Maybe I should tell her on the main course that I just had, no, main course is the wrong time. Right. I just had a bunch of butter on my steak. Dessert. No, I don't want to mess up dessert.
Right. Oh, that's a funny thing. I'm trying to remember when it came out.
It was.
Oh, I Googled you. That's right.
Yeah, you Googled me.
I did. I Googled because I was like, well, there's crazy people in the world. And I was like, let me just make sure I'm not going to get murdered tonight. So let me Google you and make sure that this is, that's right. And I was like, you do a lot of public speaking and there's like a story there. What's going on? That's what it was.
Yeah, I'm infinitely Googleable.
It's very Googleable. So that's how it came apart. And he was about, and then he told me the story. Yeah.
Wow.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe he wouldn't have even told me if I hadn't asked.
That's what you did do for a living. So you were good at telling this story. Imagine the guy being bad at telling the story.
Yeah, right.
Well, let me start at the end.
Exactly.
Let me sum up. All right.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yep. So you're sitting there. You write that note. It's you got the heart. Yeah. It's clearly not out of the woods. You're in the hospital. What does that recovery process look like for most people?
Right. So I coming out of that transplant, so the surgery is the equivalent of being hit by a Mack truck. So your sternum's busted, you've got all these tubes coming out of you, and that's a recovery for sure. You're on over 50 meds a day at extremely high dosages. You're jacked up on steroids. You're jacked up on painkillers. One of the nurses came in and she's like, "Hold your hands out." And I'm like, she's like, "Yeah, hope you don't like soup." Because the medications that you're on are going to make you tremor, make you shake for a while until your body starts acclimating. And so you start getting nurses coming in and training you. Here's a 3-ring binder. This is the manual for the rest of your life. This is how you're going to live your life. Here are all the vitals that you have to take at these times of the day to match along with these meds that you're taking. These meds have to be taken with food. These meds can't be taken with food. These meds have to be taken 12 hours after these meds. Essentially, you're on
it's a binder.
It's a thick binder.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, don't mess up or you'll die.
Yeah, no big deal.
No big
Right.
deal. So in the days following my surgery, the head of the program, the transplant program at Penn comes in. They called her the general because she was no nonsense. She was focused. She was goal oriented. She would walk in, the white lab coat would kind of splay behind her. She walked like a cape. She was a superhero. Mm-hmm. And she sits down with me. She's no nonsense. Mm-hmm. And she's like, congratulations, kid, you survived. Mm-hmm. I was like, she's like, you don't understand the number of people who don't. So what you've gone through is the closest that medical science can come to creating a miracle. And there's going to be a lot of people who come in here and tell you that you have to protect yourself. You've got to guard yourself. If the sun's out and it casts a shadow, you can't be out in it. Mm. Okay, there are a lot of reasons that you're going to be told that you need to lock yourself in a room, put a bubble around yourself. Said, I would argue that if we could talk to your donor, they would say that's not the reason that they gave you the heart that we put in your chest.
Wow.
You've been given an opportunity at life. Live it. Hmm. The other thing about this is, Derek, if you thought that dying with your original heart was bad, try dying with somebody else's heart in your chest, because you haven't taken good care of it, because you haven't done everything you could to stay compliant with your medication, stay compliant with your diet, stay compliant with exercise. And when you come back to us for another heart, we won't give it to you.
Wow.
The truth of the matter is that most heart transplant recipients will gain 100 pounds in the first year following transplant.
That's crazy. Yeah.
We already know the dangers of obesity on people with their original hearts, let alone somebody with a aftermarket part. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
So it's important that you take care of yourself. And I do consider myself a custodian of a small portion of my donor's legacy.
Wow.
And part of that is keeping myself healthy and being the best vessel, being the best chassis for their engine that I possibly can be, and taking that seriously. So she gets up, she's like, okay. She walks out of the room, she goes, don't get fat, kid.
Wow.
No nonsense woman.
Yeah, I love this woman. I need this woman in my life.
Don't get fat, kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so having this transplant, as I've said before, it's not a cure. Mm-hmm. It's a chance. The door of our lives is closing until the point where it's just a sliver of light. Mm-hmm. And that transplant allows somebody to put like a door stopper in there for just a brief moment. And then I see it as the patient's responsibility to meet that halfway, to see that crack in the door, and to, work a hand in, work a shoulder in, work your chest in, work your knee in, and then just blow that door open. That's our part. I mean, there's only so much that medical science can provide. The rest has to be generated from within. And so for me, for my donor, for everything that they've given me, it's been just paramount to make sure that I'm maintaining that legacy.
It's such an interesting deal that you had to go from completely dependent on medical intervention before, and just this depreciating health, increased dependency on everyone and everything else around you, to now you're on the other side of this, and you've got to start being an active participant, not only in your life, but in your recovery. Right. In your recovery. Because if you don't, this thing is more than likely going to go the way it's going to go.
Right.
And all you're doing is as you said, you're just elbowing your way in to making this opportunity something that can be real for you, because that window closes very quickly if you don't. And so to go from that dependency to this, to this empowered state, right? what an incredible transition. And it sounds like that was a perfect guide at the perfect time to have that woman be able to speak with you so distinctly and clearly and give you very clear instructions, especially in this place where I'm sure there's a lot of things she could say. Well, do the best so you can protect this gift that you've been given. Like, she could have used a lot of language like that rather than said, hey, this isn't about you living in a bubble. This is about isolation. That's what you've been doing for this whole time. You've had to isolate. You've been in this bubble.
Yeah.
Now it's time to break out, even though your risk factor is higher. Right? That's where all the life and actual vitality is.
And talk about starting from square -0.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so I was literally rebuilding everything from scratch. So the day before, I couldn't walk 20 feet down the hall before the transplant. The day after the transplant, they had me in a walker with my IV pole, and I was just doing laps around the wing. I was like,
No joke.
no joke. I was at home 7 days later. I was the fastest.
What? You were at home after our transplant?
Yeah. Now, I wasn't out of the woods.
Yeah.
I had gone from 205 pounds leading up to the transplant. As my body started failing, my organs started failing, I went down to 170, 150. In the 3 months following the transplant, I had gone from 150 down to 128. Skin and bone. All right. I completely atrophied. It was to the point where I was laying in bed at home, and I would try to lift my head an inch off of a pillow. That's where I started training. Inch off of a pillow, and I couldn't lift myself up. So if nobody was around to help me out of bed, I couldn't get up.
Wow.
But I had a mission. I had a purpose. So after a while, now I'll bring this into it too. My mom, everybody would come and visit me in bed, and I'd be like, hey, how's it going? You know, it was physically, mentally, it was like plugging fresh batteries into a dead remote. All of a sudden, I was me again, mentally. Physically, I was a wreck. My mom would come in and like bring me food and try and take care of me, and she'd have the boo-boo face.
The face.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, all right, Mom, I get it, but we are on a train here. This train is moving in one direction.
Yep.
I'm not accepting boo-boo face. All right? I understand why this is upsetting, but if you can't deal with this, if you're going to come in here and cry in front of me, I need you to leave. I need you to let me drive this thing. And we did.
That's beautiful. That's to be able to communicate that, because that's what compassion and love looks like in her eyes at that point. And for you to be able to tell her and just be like, nope, that's part of the past. We're not in that sad time anymore. We're building to something new.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you approach everything, really. And by default, how we approach everything is just, like look for the crack, wedge open the door, and get out of our way with the negativity and the boo-boo face.
Check out the official Unlock Potential store, where inspiration meets style. Explore our exclusive collection of gear inspired by the transformational messages straight from our Unlock Potential podcast. From trendy apparel that embraces the power of positivity to accessories that fuel your motivation. We've got something for every go-getter. Spread the messages of empowerment, energy, and motivation that you get from the Unlock Potential podcast by grabbing your gear today.
So I sat there, atrophied, and I would clench my butt cheeks. Clench and unclench my butt cheeks. That's all I could do. And so when no one was around to help me get up and out of bed, I would use what little muscle I had in my ass to wiggle myself out of bed, fall to the floor, and then do kind of like this really sloppy army crawl until I hit a chair or a vertical surface. And I would shove my face up the wall until I was standing. And then I would stagger back and forth in the 12 feet across my bedroom, back and forth by my bed. That was my next step in training. From there, I went to walking back and forth in my hallway. 20 feet, 30 feet up and back my hallway till I could do stairs. I would go downstairs. I'd go back upstairs. Now my lungs weren't conditioned yet, so stairs and having a deconditioned heart with no nerves going to it. Normally people like get adrenaline going if they want to, get something on. I had no adrenaline that pumps to my heart, or had no adrenaline pumping to my heart. My body had to take other cues. So I got to the point where I could do stairs. Then I'd walk from my kitchen to my den, to my foyer, to my dining room, back to my kitchen, to my den, to my foyer, back to my dining room, and I'd just do laps. And I was all jacked on steroids that they were giving me for that. And so I was probably a bit of a dick. Like, get out of my way, I'm moving.
Look in this house.
But I went from that to walking. I started going to physical rehab. So 3 months after, they had me go to physical rehabilitation. And, at first I was just on the treadmill, like old man walk, hunched over.
Yeah.
They had me hooked up to all the electrodes, and they've got the telemetry hooked up. They've got a group of us, and they're monitoring all of us. So Kurt was my nurse. He worked with a group of us. And so my first goal was to jog for a minute. And I was like, okay. And so I couldn't do a minute. So I started at 5 seconds.
Wow.
So I would jog for 5 seconds, and it was generous to call what I was doing a jog. And then I would walk for 55 seconds. And then I would jog for 6 seconds and walk for the 54.
Yeah.
Until I could jog for a minute. And so through the course of this rehab, Kurt's right there with me, monitoring all my heart response, monitoring everything, making sure I was okay. And, at this point, I'm, jogging on the treadmill, and I go for 30 seconds. I go for a minute. I go for 2 minutes. And I go, he was working with somebody else at the time, but I said, Kurt, do you think I can pick up the pace a little bit? He's like, yeah, don't overdo it, but yeah, go for it. And so I picked up the pace, and I'm feeling something. I don't know what it is yet. And then Kurt had to walk away. He was helping somebody across the room, and I thought if I asked permission that he would have told me to stop. So while he was across on the other side of the room, I picked up the pace again, and I went for another 2 minutes. And then all of a sudden, my feet started getting faster and lighter. And all of a sudden, my chest lifted up, my shoulders moved back, and I got goosebumps, and all the hair stood up on my arms. And I started to get what I didn't know at the time, but what I realized later was a runner's high.
Wow.
And with that runner's high, all the memories of what it felt like to be healthy and to feel vital and vibrant and alive came flooding back into me. Because I had been so sick for so long that I'd forgotten what healthy felt like. And I was like, yeah, I could get used to this.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to honor my donor to do more of that. So I started running. I went from 3 minutes of jogging to 3 miles of jogging. And I did my very first 5K 8 months after my heart transplant.
Wow. That's crazy.
At the same time, I signed up with Team in Training, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's fundraising chapter charity for cancer research, for lymphoma research. I signed up for a half marathon that was going to take place 2 months after my first 5K. And I go for a group practice, and I see a familiar face across this huddle where there was a mission moment. And it was Kurt, my cardiac rehabilitation therapist. And he looks at me, and he recognizes that he recognizes me. And he gives me this smile and nod, and then he goes, and he walks over to me. He's like, what the hell are you doing here?
Wow.
I said, I signed up to run a half marathon. He's like, holy crap. He's like, all right, man, I'm in with you. Let's do this thing. And so did the half marathon in November of 2011. It's great adding decades to this thing. And then after that, I was like, well, what else can we do? And always it's a we, right? It's not a me anymore. I might be the body, but my donor is the engine. And every time I talk to my donor, and I ask him, all right, bud, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but I'm like, all right, bud, you got me this far. Can we go a little further?
Mm.
And the answer has always been yes. So in January, I signed up with Team in Training again, January of 2012,
Mm.
signed up for my first triathlon. It was an Olympic distance triathlon for April of 2012.
Mm.
We were going to go down to St. Pete, Florida. And so I go to start training with them, and I meet my tri coach. And I was extremely self-conscious about my scarring. It's prominent.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my coach, and they're like, get out of here. Just take your shirt off, jump in the pool. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so my tri coach, get over yourself. I was afraid that I was going to scare little kids and everybody in like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But no, thankfully were much more forgiving. Anyway, my coach, the first day of practice, he says, all right, guys, I'm just going to see what I have here on the team. I want you to swim to the other side of this pool and come back to me and meet me here. We'll discuss at that point.
Mm.
I said, okay. Now, I'd never been trained in swimming. He gave us the tips of, freestyle. So I swam to the other side of the pool, huffing and puffing. I get back. Everybody's been done for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's waiting for me.
Mm.
And he's sitting there at the edge of the pool. He's like, what'd you think? And I said, well, I thought I was okay, but, obviously I just had a heart transplant a year ago. He's like, okay, fair enough. I will argue this.
Is this Todd?
Todd. Yeah. He said, let me offer you this argument. I think that you can do that better. I think that if you lift this, tuck this, do this, pull this, I want you to do it again, just like I told you, go now, do it.
Wow.
And I slid across the top of the water, banged my head against the far wall, and I came right back. And he's like, what do you think? I was like, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. And from there, we went.
Amazing. Amazing. And I think when people hear, I know in the past when I've heard experiences and never an experience just like this, right? But these experiences where it's like, it's outside of what most people experience, certainly outside of anything that I've ever lived through, it's easy to write it off and be like, well, yeah, I could see if I had lived through that experience, I would have that perspective too. Mm-hmm. And it's like, without the perspective that you grabbed onto, you wouldn't have lived through the experience.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the chicken or the egg. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't know. It seems like there's a certain attitude, or there's a chip on your shoulder, or there's this level of intensity and intention that's there, mm-hmm. that became so easy to forget with sickness, and that moment where you remembered.
Yeah,
you remembered it. And I think, if there's somebody out there who's watching right now, it's like life will give you amnesia. Mm-hmm. Suffering will give you amnesia. Mm-hmm. The results of ignorance will give you amnesia. Mm-hmm. And you'll forget who you are. You'll forget mm-hmm. what it feels like. And a lot of times the cues that we have are negative cues. Yeah. It's like we don't have those cues where you start running. We have those cues where we sit back, or where we're victimized again, which further entrenches us into an identity that's not supportive. Right. And so for you to have that experience, it was like waking up from amnesia.
Yeah.
Like you had forgotten who you were. You had forgotten what you were about. And it wasn't just about getting back there. It was about experiencing this thing again so you could create something that's in all actuality brand new. Because it's not like you were a competitive swimmer in the past. It's not like you were a competitive runner in the past. It's not like there was this deep, like you had said, you were overweight at the time. You had played a little bit of soccer while you were in school. But as far as your athletic background, it wasn't robust or continuous up to that point where you had cancer.
Right.
But in this one moment, I remember what it feels like to be alive.
Yeah.
And this along with the conversation with your heart and with a person whose legacy you're partially stewarding now is the thing that says, what else can we do? What else is possible? If this is possible, what else is possible? And I think people think they need too big of a seed to start there.
Right.
But the seed is just like that. What will get you asking that question? Right. And can you just initiate that question now?
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
With that, like, so, because sometimes people are like, well, how do you relate to that? And I'm like, well, first of all, I live with a motivational speaker, so there's that. But second of all, I think, when they say like surround yourself with people who get it, surround yourself with people who are winning in life, thriving. It's so true, because even though I don't personally have that perspective, we'll do things together where, like, I've always struggled with like being present in my life. It's something I constantly have to work on, to not be thinking like, what about this or what about that in the future? Like, I have to always reel myself in. But when you're surrounding yourself with people who are so present and so thankful to be here, it pulls you in. So we'll be on vacation or on a hike or wherever, and Derek's just so, like, you can feel it. He's just so, look at how beautiful this is. And then you're like, oh shit, look at how beautiful this is.
Yeah.
And it pulls you in. So if you've heard it, borrow from other people, confidence, borrow from other people, this, that, borrow from other people, that like sense of being present. And like, if you haven't figured it out yet, just be around people who get it, so that you can like be there and see it. Cause that's helped me live.
Yeah.
Just to be around that. So
Big time.
Two things with that. Kyle, remind me of Kyle, but I think one of the things that is such a detriment. I mean, all of this is less about your body than it is your mind, and just having that strength and that I don't know, grit, whatever you want to call it. I think most people, when they have issues, they compare themselves to where they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and how fit they were then and how not fit they are now, and how they start making that comparison. That comparison is a trap.
Yep.
All right. The comparison isn't to where you were 20 years ago, or where you were before you got sick, or where you were before you were in the accident. The comparison is where you were yesterday.
That's right.
Yep.
And where are you today, and where are you going to be tomorrow? And with consistency, I've said it before, those little steps add up. It's not a mountain anymore. It's not a mountain anymore. You can see the mountain in front of you, but if you're just focused on the very next step, pretty soon you're going to be looking at that mountain in your rear view, and you're going to continue to go forward. The other thing I was going to mention about that is my buddy Kyle Garlett. He's also a cancer surviving heart transplant triathlete. He wrote a book, and he says that so many people like to say, live your life like it's your last day on earth. And that's such a great great perspective. He said, but I would challenge people to not think that way. I would challenge people to live your life like it's your first day on earth.
Wow.
Like it's your first sunrise. Like it's the first time you tasted your favorite food. It's the first time you kissed the love of your life. You live your life that way, it completely changes the way you live. And that's the way I live every single day. What
a beautiful inversion, right? That's so amazing. My business partner and great friend Jimmy Spildiner, he read this book. I think it was maybe 10,000 Days is the name of the book. But he had that experience and just that richness in that time as he was doing that, as he was going through the ramifications of cancer eating up his body. But it was like because his wife was 8 months pregnant when he was diagnosed at stage 4, every moment with his daughter meant so much. And there's this gentleman by the name of Peter Crone, and he says, the next time you see someone, act as if it's the first time you meet them, because it is.
Right.
And that's what you're contending for, is just that first day experience, because this is brand new. This is brand new. They are brand new. You are brand new. Your self-criticism or criticism from other people died with yesterday.
So true.
Right. It's like that person who you think that you've known, that you've maybe taken for granted. That's a brand new person today.
Yep.
And so that inversion of last day to first day, I think, is everything. Last time of seeing someone to the first time,
Yep.
just that moment where you're just there, you're projecting all your wants and needs onto the circumstance. This is going to be amazing. We're never going to have any problems. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kyle's advice is well taken, and that's just the way.
That's how we try to live.
Yeah. So you're in the pool.
I'm in the pool.
You're swimming. You've gotten this coaching advice. He unlocks something in you where now you're floating on top of the water rather than fighting against sinking down to the bottom.
Yeah.
And you're at that point. You tell me what to do. I'm going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And from there, I realized very quickly that my body was functioning in a result of all the trauma that it had been through.
Mm.
And so I wasn't an efficient runner. I wasn't an efficient swimmer. I wasn't an efficient cyclist. I wasn't efficiently fueling my body.
Mm.
And I had to restart everything. So my tri-coach used to be pro. When he was pro, he had knee issues. He got out, he retired from pro triathlon and found this guy, his name's Fernando. Fernando was able to put him through a functional strength training program. Ultimately, in retirement, he became faster than he was as a pro triathlete.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I had known Fernando from afar. I had known him from other things. And so I went to see Fernando. And the man literally, I mean, I thought he was magic or something.
Mm-hmm.
I went through this functional strength training analysis of just my movements and trying to find which muscles were compensating for the muscles that should be doing particular movements. You know, I mean, just basic things where, you know, just the connectivity issues were all off.
Mm.
When I've been severed from, you know, my collarbone down to below my belt line,
Mm-hmm.
all those muscle groups have been crisscrossed.
Yeah.
And I had to start from scratch. So I finished that first triathlon in April of 2012. And then I had signed up for a half Ironman in May of 2012.
Wow.
With Fernando's help, with Todd's help, my coach, with getting nutrition, with the training, with the running, with the cycling. And I always said, all right, so if we could do that, can we take it another step further?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was just a gift
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be outdoors, to be able to be in the air and feel the sun hitting my body and being active.
Yeah.
And I still compare it, and I still live the experience of my 30s, essentially, which were sleeping 23 hours a day. So it's a gift. And so I did the Olympic distance. The month later, I did my first half iron in May. And then that November, I went from the Philly half to the Philly full marathon. I did the Transplant Games of America. And then I thought, well, why don't I go with my buddies up to Lake Placid? And we're going to watch the Ironman. We're going to ride the course before the athletes do. And then we're going to watch the Ironman that day. And that was 2012. And so we watched the Ironman that day. And so
You volunteered, I think.
I volunteered.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we went at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
The race has to end at midnight. If you don't, it's 140.6 miles of swimming, biking, and running. If you don't finish by midnight, it doesn't count.
Mm.
And so we're in the Olympic Oval. So much history in Lake Placid in the Olympic Oval.
Yeah.
And we're watching the finish line. We're right on a hill watching the shoot. Mike Riley, the famed Ironman announcer, is like, there's one more person who can possibly make it before midnight. He's 65 years old. He's had a long day. He can hear us. He's outside the oval. He's coming up the hill. Everybody give him your best, you know, cheer for this guy. So we all, Bob.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody, you know, there's stands. Everybody's stomping on the stands. Bob. Bob. And then Bob comes
the coolest finish.
into
Oh my
the
gosh.
oval. You know,
Yeah.
the Klieg lights are on. You know, and you enter the far side of the oval, you have to do the turn, and then there's the finish line 20 yards from there. So Bob comes into the oval. Crowd goes nuts. They lose their mind. Bob, Bob. And then a quarter of the way on the far side of the track, he stumbles and falls. And everybody goes, oh.
Uh-huh.
And so his coach goes out and helps Bob get to his feet. And Bob's staggering. And everybody goes, Bob, 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 Bob. And Bob gets another, 20 feet. He gets halfway through that part of the curve, and he stumbles and falls again. And everybody starts counting down from midnight. 10, 9, get up, Bob. 8, come on, Bob. Everybody's losing their mind. 5, he gets up. He staggers to about 20 feet from the finish line. 3, 2, come on, Bob. And he collapses. And Mike Riley, the announcer, goes, all right, guys, this might not have counted as an Ironman finish for Bob today, but he's still an Ironman in our books. Let's bring him home. Bob.
Oh, wow.
Bob.
Dang.
So now there's 2 guys on either side of Bob. Bob's arms are on their shoulders. His feet are trailing in between. And he gets across the finish line. The crowd loses their minds. And I call my track coach at 12:02 in the morning. And I say, I'm doing an Ironman.
Wow.
Now, at that point, there had never been a cancer surviving heart transplant recipient to ever complete an Ironman. There had been others who tried. No one had ever finished. And I said, I don't care. I'm doing it. And so I trained. And I trained and I trained and I trained. And then in July of 2013, in Lake Placid, in that Olympic Oval, I crossed the finish line, became the first cancer surviving heart transplant recipient to ever finish an Ironman, a full distance Ironman triathlon.
Thank you for joining us for the first part of this awesome conversation with Derek and Erin Fitzgerald, walking us through the first part of this journey. If you thought that was awesome, I can't wait for you to be able to listen to the rest, to be able to dive into that story. If you have stories of your own, if this was inspiring to you, if you have friends or family members who have went through something similar, make sure to share your story in the comments. Feel free to DM us. Make sure to subscribe and let us know the story that you're living through, because I know, just like for Derek and Erin, that the story of struggle becomes a launch pad for the story of success and significance. Thanks so much for joining us. Plug in next time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Unlock Potential. For exclusive content, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon. Follow us across all socials at @TheBrianDelaney and visit our website at thebriandelaney.com to shop our gear and see what's coming up next.